Would you believe me if I told you that this card right here was changing Legacy? Hello folks, Phil Gallagher aka ThrabenU here for another Legacy video, and today we're going to be playing Living End. And first I want to talk about what might be the start of a fundamental shift in Legacy deck building, and I don't say that lightly. Our recent Lord of the Rings set has everyone talking about the One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters, but very quietly cards like this one have started doing a lot of work. And the easiest way to see this happening is just someone swamp cycling this card and then casting Reanimate on it. And this can be done on turn 1 off of something like a Dark Ritual or Lotus Petal. So you can kind of get a turn 1 6/5 super menace creature. Cool. You know? And like it cantripped, it got you your next land drop as well. But I want to really draw attention to the exact wording of this swamp cycling, okay? Discard this card, search your library for a swamp card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. Now, did you catch that? That was a swamp card, not a basic swamp like the land cyclers that we've had previously. So what that means is you have a 1 mana option that allows you to search your library for a dual land. Now, why might this matter? Well, that's a card that's imprintable via Chrome Mox. That's a card that can be reanimated with Reanimate or another spell. So we very well might come to a time where Legacy decks start cutting some number of lands in order to just play more of these things. These are guaranteed cantrips for dual lands, and as the game goes long, they're just big, beefy creatures that are incredibly slow by Legacy standards, but have a good amount of flexibility to them. And some people are talking and comparing this to the same shift we saw when Ponder started seeing serious Legacy play. And I know that might sound crazy to say, but there was a time in Legacy where people weren't sure if they should be playing Ponder in their blue control decks. I'm not kidding you, people were running around playing Miracles with 0 copies of Ponder or maybe 2 copies of Ponder because they thought it was an okay card, but not worth playing 4 of. So we may come to a new shift in Legacy where these cards start having a very large impact on the format. And I think today's deck list is a great example of a deck that is built around this mechanic. Our goal for today is going to be cycle a large number of creatures and then reanimate all of them at the same time with a Living End. And this is also going to serve as a board wipe as well, as it will get rid of the creatures that are currently in play. You'll notice that this card doesn't have a traditional mana cost. We're not intending on suspending this and playing it in a fair way. Instead, we are going to cascade into it, which allows us to sort of play our 0 cost card for free without paying its traditional mana cost. Now, Living End is a deck that I've heard is currently tier 0 in Modern, just one of the absolute best things that you could be doing. Let's see how it holds up by Legacy standards, and let's take a look at this deck list. Now, today's video is sponsored by both Moxfield.com as well as Cool Stuff Inc. And remember, if you want to try out this deck in paper or you want to buy any other Magic cards, promo code ThrabenU will save you 5% at checkout at Cool Stuff Inc. So here is the deck list in all of its glory. So we are playing a whopping 3 of the cyclers from our new Lord of the Rings set, as well as a bunch of the traditional cyclers that you are seeing. So a huge portion of the deck is essentially just like air, where you get to pay 1 mana to get to the next card in your deck. And we want to chain a whole bunch of these things together before casting our Living End. Grief and Force of Will give us a little bit of protection or the ability to clear a path, and then we have both Violent Outburst as well as Shardless Agent to go and get us to the appropriate amount of mana. Notice here, though, that there is a deck building cost. We always want to cascade into Living End, which means that nowhere in the 75 can we have something that costs less than 3 mana, meaning that we have to get a little more creative when it comes to our assorted counterspells that we are going to be playing. Yeah, I think that's most of what I have to say here. And so I guess the last thing I want to say is my donation queue is currently very small. If you have something that you want to see on the channel, it will happen extremely quickly, and all the information to get one of your sweet decks on the channel is available in the video description down below via my website. All right, let's battle. All right, we're playing against a Yorion deck of some kind here. I don't have a starting land, so this one has to be a mulligan. Wow, that's awkward. So, if I keep this hand, I get to put one of my 3 copies of Living End back into the deck, which means that I get exactly 1 shot to do the thing. I think that means that I have to mulligan this one. Drawing all 3 of the Living Ends in one hand is statistically quite unlikely. Alright, this is fine. I'm going to keep this. I'll put the Living End back into the deck. And I am probably not going to be using Force of Will here. I just can't go down the card. This is going to be a bit of an unexciting hand in many ways. Let's just immediately cycle this. Basics? Basics for now seems fine. Let's go ahead and get an island and pass. I'll cycle this in a minute. And we'll probably learn on turn 1 whether we're playing against Death and Taxes or some other blue-based Yorion deck. Alright, I am very heavy on mana here, which I do not want to actually see. Yeah, I guess let's continue. I only have 2 basics? I only have 2 basics. Thought I would have a basic mountain in here. JK. In which case, I will get a red mana and call it good. Yeah, this forest cycling here is a little awkward for me because I am a bit flooded. It seems like my opponent has a black splash, presumably for Orcish Bowmasters, which is annoying. But it does mean that my Street Wraiths will potentially be unblockable. I probably just cycle this on my opponent's turn to make Orcish Bowmasters more awkward. It's just so incredibly unlikely that Death and Taxes keeps a hand that does not have access to a 2-drop. Yep. I'll go ahead and cycle that in response. I'll cycle that in response. I'll cycle that in response. I believe that will be the last forest in my deck. Alright. So basically, Living End is going to be really effing good if it happens. Need to find a Cascade card, or my opponent can deal me 13 points of damage. I think they're supposed to be attacking with Mother of Runes. Yeah, they figured it out. Alright, I'm at 10. Sure. Alright, that's just Yorion to hand. That is not a real problem. Alright, there we go. Shardless Agent. So, I cast Shardless Agent. I Cascade. I cast Living End without paying its mana cost. Okay. My opponent is going to do a cool trick here. They're going to evoke a Solitude, and they're just going to gain a little bit of life. The evoked creature goes to their graveyard. That means that they can bring it back. The top 3 cards of target player's library. I'll choose my opponent here. Then I get some food tokens. My opponent can remove one of my creatures. Alright, I lose an Ent. That brings me up to 15 life. So I want the Flicker Wisp on bottom here. I literally don't care about any of the other cards. I probably make my opponent draw both of the lands. I go bam, bam, bam. Alright, good stuff. I've made my land drop. Alright, they're chilling. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 mana towards casting this. Unblockable, unblockable, unblockable. Alright, my opponent is just conceding. Alright, they just had nothing. Sure. So I've got a couple of different ways that I could play this turn just talking about it. I can just shove with everything and like potentially end up trading this for this for Bowmasters, and then net a little bit more damage than if I just attacked with these 3 with evasion. Yeah, but we just kind of punked our opponent there. So I guess the big thing that I have to worry about is something like Deafening Silence. Because that's more than one spell each turn, so that is just a hard stop to Violent Outburst and Shardless Agent. So I probably have to play 3 copies of Force of Vigor. Foundation Breaker is also interesting. I'm not 100% sure whether or not my opponent's build will be on ley lines. They vary a little bit. Subtlety's okay. I'm probably not going to Force of Will here. And from here, I just don't have experience to know what I am supposed to cut next. Like, if I just don't care about what my opponent is doing with their cards, I can trim some griefs. Or I only have to trim one, right? Just trim a grief. That's in theory fine. Kind of care about Bowmasters. I kind of care about Spirit of the Labyrinth. Maybe those things matter. This still takes them. Alright. So this hand is not dead to a leyline. It has a way to get another land. It has another cycler. I am totally fine keeping this one. Don't hit an initial leyline, which is good. Vial is fine. I will not Force of Vigor that immediately. That card is not what this is for. I'm going to go ahead and play Volk and pass. I'll always end up Forest cycling with a Generous Ent here. Wasteland is quite strong. Go find a new land. Grab a Trop. I am not going to take out the Aether Vial. Again, I have a very clear vision of kind of where I'm going right now, and I just want to stick on that path. Yeah, I'll evoke and destroy an Aether Vial for 2 mana. I don't know, maybe if I have this, I don't have to sweat Force of Vigor as much anymore, and I just don't let them get the extra mana value. The extra mana value makes the Rishadan Port better. Alright, I think I've changed my mind. Alright. We'll see if this ends up being correct. It's quite obviously very on the fence about the play. Stoneforge Mystic is annoying. Lion Sash. That is an artifact. We got a plan for that, but it's kind of a bad plan in many ways. This would be a cool time to cycle into a Grief, I suppose. You're not Grief. You're also not Grief. Alright. Let's fetch, find some red. Cycle this now. Alright, did not find Grief. I don't know, maybe it was wrong to not just land cycle. Land cycling guarantees that I can just cast Violent Outburst on my next turn. Yeah, I think that was a mistake. Okay, movement from my opponent. Thalia's reasonable. That puts me a mana further away from Violent Outburst. Actually, it puts me 2 mana further away, honestly, because it's 1 for Violent Outburst and then 1 for Living End beyond that. I guess at 4 mana, Shardless Agent does it. Shardless Agent doesn't get taxed by Thalia. Let's Swamp Cycle. The red is more important. Go ahead and just cycle this while Bowmasters is down. Cool. I have my colors covered. Let's play this and pass. My opponent, in theory, can eat 2 creatures out of my graveyard, which is quite good. Alright, so I ate 2 from Thalia. And this is just Shardless Agent into Living End, mostly to clear out my opponent's stuff. Like, it will be a small Living End for me, but you know, it's a Living End that is going to eat 3 of my opponent's creatures and stop them from just going completely ham with Lion Sash. Double Cascade. Cast Living End, paying the 1. My opponent will vial in their Lion Sash and eat my 2 most annoying creatures. So Troll gone and Ent gone, probably. Yeah, Troll and Ent gone. Alright. We get a couple copies of these. Let's do one of these targeting my opponent. And 2 of those targeting me. Yeah, these are reasonable Magic the Gathering cards. I don't really need to cycle a Street Wraith. I'm going to just draw Curators of Mysteries. I do have to do that again. Okay. Am I fine with my opponent drawing Leyline of the Void? Yes. Stoneforge Mystic is the scariest thing there. Alright. Good stuff. And we won that in short order through some taxation and graveyard hate. Death and Taxes seems like a very good matchup for us. Today's video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, which is, in my opinion, the best Magic the Gathering website for hosting your deck lists online. One of my favorite features is that you can create your own custom tags for when you're deck building. So let's say you're building a commander deck and you want to know, hey, how many copy effects do I have? You can just create a tag and sort everything, and there's fun little hotkeys so that you can do this more quickly. So really, please consider checking them out if you are looking to tinker with deck lists online. All right, we have a decent start here. I will need to hit another mana source, but we have some decent tools at our disposal here. Go ahead and just make a land drop and pass the turn. I don't think I'm into casting a Grief here. I'd like to do that the turn that I'm going to cast Violent Outburst. There's some consideration that I should just cycle on my own turn, because like Orcish Bowmasters is effing everywhere in Legacy right now, and I may take a little bit of additional damage for not cycling immediately. Oh, that's fine. Ooh, no second land drop off that Ponder. Ah, second main phase hipster. Understood. I'm gonna go grab a Volk and start cycling. Sure. Think it matters too much when I cycle that. Cycle this one now. I think Troll gives me guaranteed third mana. I always need green red. I'll pick up Badlands here. Against these lands, I'm not anticipating combo. I'm anticipating something in the Delver ballpark. Yeah. That can resolve. With this draw, I can now cycle Street Wraith. Go ahead and Grief, pitch an Architect's of Will, see how much permission I'm facing over there. 2 Dazes and a Force of Will. I can only beat a single Daze as of right now. I was not expecting 3 pieces of interaction to be available this turn. I think I take Spell Pierce. Force of Will requires a 2 for one of the Dazes, set them back in a different capacity as well. Yeah. Take Spell Pierce. I'm going to cycle this now. The next turn I can potentially try to beat Daze and Force. I keep this to pitch to my Force and just call it a turn. I'll take 4 damage and then have a couple of chances at beating what my opponent has going on over there. Let's just fetch immediately, see if a Stifle is going to get involved in the conversation. It is not. I always have green. I should always have red. I would like an extra blue here. Grab an Underground Sea. And I guess I don't even need to do this on my opponent's turn. This is an instant. I think I will do it in their upkeep before they have drawn a card, though. Sure, that's fine. Daze is currently not hard castable. So this is actually probably a good opportunity. Let's attempt this first one here. Cascade into a Living End. Alright, that is Force of Will, pitching a Daze. I will Force of Will, pitching Architects of Will. I beat the Daze that I know about. 1 unknown card. Nice. Yeah, I will take the Lightning Bolt here, as double bolt is the easiest way for me to die. 6, 11, 14, 17, 24. Kills my opponent in 1 shot. Even, well, I guess they could chump block and, no, they're at 18, yeah, they're dead. So I have to figure out how I want to approach this. Like, I can approach this in a way where I cast some random fair stuff, or I can approach this in a way where I try to do anti-counterspell nonsense. I also can just try to punk my opponent with Blood Moon. Just lead on Forest Island, moon them. My opponent is going to have so much interaction for my counterspells, though, assuming that they play like Pyroblast, Red Elemental Blast sorts of things. I think for that reason I like Grief better than counterspells. Yeah, I think I'm into doing this Blood Moon thing. I think despite the fact that like Force of Will was incredibly good for me that game, I don't know that that is going to be the norm. Like, I don't know that 2-for-1ing myself is going to be just correct in a vacuum. Do I even want a Mystical Dispute? The issue is that like Mystical Dispute is good against fighting the hard counters, but then puts me into territory where the soft counters probably get me. I think I'm not going to Mystical Dispute on the draw. Oh, this is kind of whatever. Like, I have some lands, I have the ability to cycle. This is going to be fine. The thing that I'm not prepared for is like a random Grafdigger's Cage or something out of my opponent's sideboard. I think I'm just gonna like deal with that and start hard casting 3/3s if that happens, rather than board some situational cards for it. All right, I am going to just immediately cycle, I think. Got Bowmaster Trauma. It does look like my opponent is Rogue, but, you know. Bowmaster has appeared in many decks where I wasn't expecting it to be, is all I'm saying. Grief is very good. I'll do that on a turn where I might want to Violent Outburst. Let's get some more lands into my hand. There's Badlands. Go ahead and play that. Forest Cycle. The basic? Maybe the basic. I do have 2 Blood Moons that I do want to respect. Getting Forest will make hard casting some of these things a little bit harder if we get to that stage of the game. This is a thick Tarmogoyf. Alright, they've got another land drop. I get whacked for 5. I'm at 15. I have 2 Violent Outbursts, which probably means that I'll go for one at my opponent's end of turn, and then go for another on my own turn. But I don't know that that's this turn. I think I'm willing to take 5 more damage to set up a little bit more. I'm pitching Living End to Grief as of right now, so I can just cycle this one. There's a lot of Violent Outburst. Now let's cycle the Riverwinder as well. Okay, cool. So next turn, I will cast a Grief, try to plow a path forward so that the combination of Violent Outburst over their turn and my turn can get me there. I think that's better than just going for it on this turn when Daze is much more live. All right, new land drop from my opponent. I go to 10. All right, so it is do or die time here. So let us cast a Grief, pitching a Living End. Oh, it has resolved. I wasn't really expecting that. A Stifle on... I think that's the trigger targeting them. Okay. Yes. There's 10 damage on board. I've got to go for it. I think I go for it now when they have less mana available rather than letting them untap and then like open up more brainstorm lines. Cycling this is actively bad for me. All right, I will cast Living End. Force of Will, pitching Brazen Borrower. I think I am dead to that. Yeah, 10 damage on board. That'll do. All right, I will concede there. Now when I'm on the play, I like the Mystical Disputes a little bit more, I think. I would like to play all of those. Maybe if my opponent is playing Endurance, is playing Tarmogoyf, which cares about my own graveyard count, Endurance is less good than I actually think it is. Yeah, I'll buy that. And I think I'll go with an extra Force of Will here. It's possible that I just want to max out on Force of Wills and just pick a spot and go for it. Because, like, roughly 2 of these things getting into play probably kills my opponent. Maybe I can just go down on, like, down on Street Wraith since it negatively impacts my life total. Or more Force of Wills. I don't know. I need the black cards to pitch to Grief. Like, Architect of Will is not getting boarded out because it pitches to both Force and Grief, which is super relevant. This gives me Velocity, though. Alright, I'm good with this. Yeah, oddly the Mountain Cycler saves this hand. I will keep this. Yeah, so I'll cycle Street Wraith to start things off. That's fantastic. I will just get the basic here. We'll do a regular cycle on this. Did not want to draw that. Okay, they're just chilling. Every turn that they don't have a threat in play is fantastic for me. I will start cycling here. Cycle. Play this. Mountain cycle this. I'm going to grab Badlands because that's not fetchable off Misty Rainforest, I suppose. So I might just kind of naked go for it next turn. Use some of my opponent's resources and then intend on just straight up suspending a Living End and then going for it a second time on the turn when Living End goes off, because like they'll have to counter that, and then I can just like play a Shardless Agent or a Violent Outburst immediately afterwards. It's a cool deck. There's a lot of play to it. Skill ceiling's probably very high. Alright, are we gonna see a Tarmogoyf again? Fuck. Absolutely was not ready for that. So this may end up pivoting me to a game plan where I just cast creatures with power and toughness to actually win. Getting to the 7-drop is pretty tough, though. I don't think I'm going to do that one. But casting things like this is totally reasonable. Gonna make a land drop and pass here. This one does die to Lightning Bolt, which is a little bit annoying, but, you know, it is what it is. This I like. So I think I'm going to go ahead and just make that land drop, pass the turn. I'll cast a Violent Outburst on my opponent's end step, and make them expend resources fighting over that. When in reality, I don't care about that card all that much. Stifle on the Misty would be a little bit awkward. What do you have to fetch to play? Yeah, that's fine. Alright, let's see if there's a Stifle. There is not. Let's attempt a Violent Outburst around a Daze. Cast a Living End. Counterbalance reveals a 6-drop. A Force of Will pitching a Force of Negation. So I could cycle if I wanted. I think I want. Take a look for a Force of Will. An Ent. A good 6-drops that I can start casting. This is a wild thing to say in Legacy. Although I guess my opponent does have another Hooting Mandrills, which is awkward. So I guess I just make my opponent fight again with a Shardless Agent. Cast Living End. I'm doing this around Spell Pierces. Minor Misstep. Sure. So, I have another Living End in my hand, unfortunately. Alright, I'll go to 10. There's a Hooting Mandrills. Now I guess I need to look at my deck list. Volk, Trop, Underground Sea. Just confirm that I have not used Underground Sea. I have not. I would like black for Living End in theory, which means cycling this. I want this over this one. Like, I would like to cast these two, because they just line up better versus Hooting Mandrills. I guess I can get the second Volk. Alright. Unfortunately, the third Living End is in my hand. I think I play the biggest booty one first. Because the upside of one of these resolving is so high. The reality of this situation is that if I get smacked by both Hooting Mandrills, I'm probably just dead, even if I do resolve another creature next turn. I think I just play the better one now. Tarmogoyf on top of my opponent's library. Alright, I've picked up a food. I'm not safe. Yep. Yeah, we will cast another 6-drop. Counterbalance trigger. Minor misstep. Alright. Brazen Borrower type cards are starting to look a little spooky. No attacks, I presume? Yeah. Alright, drawing Violent Outburst is not great. So I am 1 mana away from casting this as a 5/5. So many of the cards in my deck just cantrip. I think I just cycled this. Yeah. Let's go ahead and just start casting big things. Hello and good luck, counterbalance. Pyroblast is a thing that exists. I haven't really, given my opponent too many Pyroblast targets. I don't think I'm going to try to just turn the corner by attacking with the troll. Alright, Hardcast Force of Will is live. I know one of my opponent's cards is Minor Misstep. By the same logic as last turn, I think I just cycle this. This is actually a good draw. Might not look like it at first glance, but it very much is. I need my second black source to suspend Living End. Where is that? Okay, here it is. That gives my opponent something to use their mental misstep on in a couple of turns. And, if I hypothetically were to resolve a Living End, it would be pretty okay. Sure. I'm gonna take a little snack at end of turn here. Living End ticks down. Yep. We're going to play this very strange game. Alright, I've got a Tarmogoyf. This Force of Will pitching the Minor Misstep. My opponent now does not have a guaranteed way to counter the Living End that is coming. Ooh, we are seeing attacks. Alright, both Tarmogoyfs are coming in. I think this is just a block situation. I could lose both of my creatures, 1 to Tarmogoyf, 1 to Lightning Bolt. I think I just have to accept that, though. Another Tarmogoyf. Okay. This ticks down. The top of my opponent's library is completely random. I chump block a Tarmogoyf, I block a Tarmogoyf, I take 8. Yep. Block. Block. I'm at 4. Does your 1 card or the random top card of your library beat this Living End? Cast. Counterbalance randomly reveals Misty Rainforest, and I think I lose the game for that. That's very upsetting. I play this, I block both Tarmogoyfs, I attack, eat 8 damage. Violent Outburst doesn't do anything. All 3 Living Ends have been covered. Give him a little heart attack on the way out. Or is there any out? It's not this. Yeah, Grief doesn't do it. Cast Violent Outburst. Top card is stupid Misty Rainforest. Die. That was a great game. All right, round 3, we're 1-1 after that tragic loss to not a literal coin flip. Probably opponent had 30% to hit or something like that. I could crunch the actual numbers, but I'm a little salty about that land on top of their library. Not very salty because it was an amazing game. So let's go ahead and fetch here. You grab Underground Sea. I really don't need the black mana this game, though, in all likelihood. I'm going to go ahead and immediately cycle here. Guess I'll grab the Badlands. Living End gives me something to pitch to Grief next turn. It makes me a little more comfortable in just cycling that now. Would love, 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 love to either hit another blue card or another cycler. Hit. Play the Badlands and pass. And a Living End for 3 creatures is totally fine. What, like 14 power? Is it 6? Yeah. Alright. So, land drop. Cast Grief. Pitching Living End. Force of Will pitching Brainstorm. Force now? I think force now. This will let me know whether or not I need to wait, rather than just immediately committing the Shardless agent. Okay. This is an interesting play. My opponent needs multiple pieces of free interaction here. And they do not have it. I will take that Snuff out and leave that Hogak stranded in their hand. And then we'll go ahead and Shardless Agent, Cascade into Living End. I will grief my opponent again. This one has to take the Hogak, and my opponent is done with me. GG's. I think I would like Endurance versus this opponent for some random anti-Hogak nonsense. Bowmasters is kind of annoying. It's like annoying if it comes down very quickly. Subtlety and Mystical Dispute are playable. Blood Moon is worth considering. I don't know whether or not my opponent is on ley lines or surgicals. I would imagine surgicals, but I've been wrong before. I don't really care about surgical all that much piloting this deck. My opponent's probably going to have discard. Force of Will can be a little awkward versus discard. I don't know exactly what my opponent's build is going to look like. All I know is that I want these two cards. Like, is the plan just not 2-for-1 myself, or do I need these for a combo aspect? Unsure. I'm going to go down 2 Force of Wills. This has no starting mana source, so it will be a mulligan. Yeah, this is pretty reasonable. I think I'm going to get rid of an Architect of Will here. Maybe I don't 2-for-1 myself with Grief. I don't know. Like, Grief into Violent Outburst is such an easy way to win. I throw back an Architects of Will. So I'm going to cycle at least one of these right now. Given that, do I cycle the second one? I don't think I have to. That's fine. There's a Bayou. Go ahead and cycle this for a Volcanic Island. And call that a turn. I can do cycling on my opponent's turn just fine. That way they don't get any value off of Bowmasters if they play one at end of turn. So I cycle this one. There is a Bowmasters. So now the question is, do I cycle this one in response? This is currently my black card for Grief. I feel like the answer is no. Alright, so I get pinged. I draw my card. I get pinged. And that's all fine. I'm going to go ahead and play a land. Cast Grief, exiling Architects of Will. Get no response. That's an Endurance. Okay. You're doing this exiling my graveyard. I think you stacked that wrong. I think you're supposed to evoke it first. Maybe it doesn't matter. So I guess I just Naked Violent Outburst in response here. And see if my opponent has another piece of interaction. Cast Living End. Ooh, they do. Then I get to grief my opponent. I'll take their other Orcish Bowmasters. I'm going to have a little bit of work to do here. That is a pretty savage top deck. I mean, Endurance plus Flusterstorm is exactly the sort of thing my opponent's looking for. Hardcasting this is awkward in the face of that Grist. Cycling it, also awkward. But I think here we are. Yeah. Mountain Cycle. Pick up a Badlands. Make a land drop and pass. Unfortunately, I'm just dead next turn, so I just have to luck into a reasonable draw. And even if I do, I'm still in trouble to the Grist. Yeah, I can't hardcast that. Cycling that doesn't get me anywhere. Yep, that's unfortunate. Like, opponent picked their spot well. Knowing that my opponent has Endurance, I think I want Force of Will now. And I think I'm going to ignore the Hogak that I saw, having seen more of their deck now. I think that's a Hogak is a cute one of, because Orcish Bowmasters provides 2 bodies that can cast it sort of thing. Blood Moon's kind of interesting as well. So this is just sort of an infinite cycling hand. which is a bit unexciting. Like, I use one of these to cycle one of these to get my second land. On turn 2, I can double cycle before my opponent has Bowmasters down. That's fine. I'm not sure if this is better or worse than other options, and I'm going to just kind of be cognizant of Stifle, get a Trop, and Mountain Cycle for Valk. I don't have to do this on my turn, and I probably shouldn't in case my opponent is randomly playing Reanimate. Oh, neat. So I think I take a real card here. Now that I have another land, I will take another real card off of this. Sure. Seems like a really bad time to do that. Like, I legitimately don't understand the play. Sure. Alright, no attack there. Drawing a Living End is a little awkward. My opponent could have Bowmasters. I think I'll just play my land drop and pass the turn. If my opponent goes to fetch, maybe I cycle this in response. Yeah. So cycle. Okay, very much not what I'm looking for. Okay, yep. Delighted Halflings haven't really done work yet that makes them better than other existing mana dorks. Alright, I'm at 14. Okay. Doesn't actually fetch black. Grab a Trop. Cycle this. Grab Badlands. This doesn't actually cycle here. This does. These are no longer actual cycling cards, since I've drawn so many lands. Awkward that I don't have a black source in play already. I think I do cycle this now and give my opponent a little bit more power. Sure, that's annoying. Alright, so I'll get pinged, and then I'll get pinged twice. And then my opponent's dead if they can't beat this Shardless agent. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Available 2 random cards. I think I'm under enough pressure here where I can't take 8 with the Bowmasters around. So let's jam. This is a hell of a board wipe if it works. Cast Living End. Yep. That is what it is. I'll block with Shardless Agent on this Orc token here to buy 4 life and put 1 more creature in my graveyard for the purposes of a Living End actually resolving. Is the way that I win this game. Hell yeah. So I'll do this in my opponent's upkeep. Yep. And I don't believe that I cycle additional creatures here. So show me another counterspell, and it can't be Soft Permission. Well, actually, I guess another Fluster would do it, right? I cast 2 spells before the Fluster instead of the normal 1. I mean, what do you want me to say? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not to dead, but am close. Resolves. Ow. My opponent goes to 2. I believe they are supposed to Cabal Therapy, sacrificing an Orcish Bowmasters so that they have a better chance of winning the game if something goes wrong. Then I can never like cycle anything. They ping me for 1, finding another Bowmasters kills me. I think since I am on fully just rip a Shardless Agent or I'm dead, or equivalent, or I'm dead, I just put those into the graveyard. Generous Ent does not keep me alive. I could cast it, resolve it. I can't crack the food. I can block this, take 4, and die. That's unfortunate. GG's. Alright, I've kept my opening hand for round 4 here. It's pretty good. I've got a couple of cyclers. I have a Force of Will as sort of an emergency break for some of the things going on the other side of the table. It's gonna make a basic land drop. I don't know. Bowmasters is a thing. Maybe I just cycle before my opponent is at 2 mana. Alright. Cycle this again. I have enough land drops. I don't need to cycle these. And I still have a blue card to pitch to Force of Will. I'm just going to go ahead and cycle this now. All right, have a few too many lands. I don't want to pitch this Curator of Mysteries to Force of Will if I can help it, because it is a true redraw. Ooh, nice. So now it's just cycle, go for it next turn with Force of Will protection. Brainstorm's fine. All right, there's a fetch to clear. If we're working with some sort of Bant stuff, something that looks a little more Delvery. Okay, cool. So we're probably facing down either a Bant or Jeskai control deck list. We're probably not facing down 4 colors, given that we've seen 2 basics here, and what I assume will be a 3rd basic. Absolutely not. That has to be countered, because this stops casting of Living End. Fuck. Switching back to basics. Alright. So I need to aggro this thing down. My opponent just made my life a lot easier. So we're going to go ahead and cycle both of these. I'll mountain cycle for the Badlands. I'll fetch. Okay, grab the Underground Sea. Since we expect this game to go on for a while, I am going to be cycling for I'm going to be fetching for the lands that I can't cycle for first here. Are these. So, do I cast Shardless Agent as a 2/2 that can attack Teferi Time Raveler? I believe no, because I don't have a follow-up Cascade thing. I have a bunch of big dumb creatures that I can draw. Like, I'm not even, like, with 3 more lands in hand, I don't even think I cycled the Generous Ent. Oh, buddy. Alright, life's bad. So this game is very much how long do I want to play before I concede, because I've probably lost. But, you know, I don't feel defeated yet. Like, I feel like my opponent is north of 80% to win this game. But I don't think it's over. Swords, Dress Down, Ponder. I mean, I'll take the removal spell. Specifically the exile removal spell. If we can put Jace into a mode where Jace is bouncing, like, that's pretty cool. My opponent can Jace bounce my Grief and then dress down it so I don't take another card in the next turn cycle. Alright, there's a Brainstorm. So their cards are unknown again. Seen this used. Yeah. Okay. So it's hard for me to tell whether my opponent has kept Dress Down since they made this error. Like, they wanted the Mystic Sanctuary, put Swords of Plowshares on top. Okay. I am now going to assume that Dress Down is gone. Maybe incorrectly. I get to try to kill one of these Planeswalkers. Go ahead and fetch, take a land out of the deck here. I have a Forest Cycler in here. I have more Mountain Cyclers in the deck. Grab this. I think the Jace is more valuable. Like, the Teferi stops me from comboing. Alright, so my opponent has untapped, which gives me a chance to now Swamp Cycle this and hit Force of Will to kill Jace. Let's see if I hit. Did not. So now we will just start casting creatures. I'll do this to myself here. Land goes on bottom, and then we will just happily draw the other of these. My opponent did a pretty big punt with that Mystic Sanctuary. Like, they hit another Swords to Plowshares, but if they didn't, that was a game-losing mistake. And I got a lot of ground back through their mistake. Like, I don't feel like I am losing all that hard anymore. I'm still losing. Like, my opponent just, like, Jace minus bounces the Architects, and I play 1 6-drop creature a turn while they Jace minus and get other value. Sure. Sorry, I forgot about Teferi. I couldn't have cycled into Force of Will. A Mentor. That's very good. So let's try to kill Jace. I'm valuing that higher than Teferi. Sure. Cast your cantrip. Okay. You can now chump block with your Monk. That's fine. And then I'll go ahead and just play a big creature. Force of Will is annoying. Mentor can spiral this game out of control pretty quickly. With that in play, backed by 2 Planeswalkers, I don't really think I win anymore. Another Monastery Mentor is pretty bad. Counterbalance is very bad. So this game has now become I need to remove Teferi over removing Jace, which should be extremely unlikely. Because my opponent just gets 2 Jace minus for 3 turns while attacking me with Mentor tokens. Like, I just invest all my mana to have that be undone by Jace bounce. I am comfortable conceding here. At 11 life, I'm probably even dead on my opponent's turn. So my opponent has back to basics and counterbalance that I have to think about, which makes Force of Vigor and or Foundation Breaker things that I need to be thinking about. I also might need Subtlety, because Teferi, it only buys 1 turn. I mean, maybe 1 turn is enough. Maybe I don't need it on the draw? I'm so very unsure about sideboarding for this deck. Like, I'm very hesitant to touch these because, like, I am playing 14 lands at the end of the day. And I know I have a lot of cyclers, but I think I'm going to play 2 of these. And I want Mystical Disputes. I think I'm going to go down Street Wraiths. Oh, these are hexproof. 5 power, the others are 6 power. Let's try that. So I've got a couple outs to a bad enchantment that hits play. This hand is not good. There's a Force of Will I can't pair with anything. A Grief I can't really pair with anything. Yeah, I don't like this. Yeah, this hand is good. Probably just pitch a land here and call that good. I'm going to need to draw more cyclers. I've boarded out 5. But my plan is to not go for it until I can do so with Mystical Dispute up. I'll take an Underground Sea here. Another Trolls, kind of whatever. Let's just play this and pass. I don't think just going for it with 2 Trolls is enough to win the game. But I might just go for it and not fight over it and save the Mystical Dispute for something later. Okay, so my opponent pondered and played Plains. I thought for a while on their ponder. Alright, so I'll grab a bad lands. These don't properly cycle anymore. My opponent does not have open blue mana right now. I think I'm just going to pass the turn, though. I want to be able to Mystical Dispute a Teferi and have another draw step to grief my opponent. Alright, there's Teferi. I will Mystical Dispute this. Alright, I get it. My deck is bad against Teferi protected by Force of Will. My opponent forget to plus their Teferi? No, okay, there it goes. Yeah, there would have been the card to go for grief with all this stuff as backup. So I'll cast this as a fair card now. Take my opponent's only actual card. Would you like... God damn it. Yeah, they discarded that Brainstorm. They didn't cast that. Alright. They're plussing Teferi. Yep. I target you. I'm gonna just force that fetch land. Mentor goes furthest down. Flooded Strand on top. Last turn. I'm hoping them to crack the Prismatic Vista. Okay, cool. Those cards were good. Okay. This is the sort of thing that I want to see. My opponent didn't play the mountain that I knew about. Like, I am just trying to whittle down Teferi's loyalty. We'll do this again, targeting my opponent. Ponder, predict Teferi. Teferi goes on bottom. Then ponder. Then predict. They're going to just fetch again, given the play pattern from last time. Yep. It's good for me because those cards were good. Like to find my 2 basic lands before my opponent randomly draws like back to basics. That would be cool. Okay. That is, in theory, fine. So here's my out to it. My opponent has Jace the Mind Sculptor in their deck. It could randomly be on top of their library. Monastery Mentor is randomly on top of their library. I do not like that. Blow up Counterbalance. Yes. Go to combat. Punch Teferi back down to 1 loyalty. I cannot Force of Will the Mentor because of Teferi. But I hopefully can attack and kill Teferi this turn. In which case, things are good for me. Send in at Teferi. Alright. Teferi is dead. My opponent has 1 card. If it's Force of Will, it's very awkward for me to not do something right now. If it's any card other than Force of Will, like if it's a Luster or a Spell Pierce or whatever, I'd rather do it on their turn. I think I'm going to cycle this and then go for Shardless Agent. I think I am comfortable with this. It's just like doesn't let the Mentor get out of control. Is Force of Negation. So I will go ahead and Force of Will. Pitching Force of Will? No, I think pitching the Riverwinder. I would love to just draw a 5th land and have Force of Will available so that my opponent can't hardcast a Terminus. Alright, there's a land drop. I'm no math wizard, but yeah. So how did that feel? I had outs to counterbalance. I had outs to back to basics. Teferi is such an ass kicker. I think when my opponent's on the play, I need subtlety. I don't want this. I really, really, really don't want this, but it feels like a lot of this game is going to come down to whether or not my opponent can stick a Teferi. Alright. I am going to keep this. I have the ability to win a fight over a Teferi while hitting 3 land drops. I don't think I was supposed to board down on the Ents as much as I did, because they get me my basic forest. Never mind, I just hit it a different way. That's fine. Alright, cool. Let's grab a Volk. A lot of protection. I might be doing sort of an embarrassing living death for exactly 2 creatures. I will Mystical Dispute that. It's a pain in the butt. Alright, cool. I'm going to go ahead and respect back to basics, even if doing so potentially makes my life a little bit more awkward later on. So I just need black here. Grab Badlands. Subtlety. I mean, yeah. Try to put a bunch of power in play. This is big enough that my opponent probably has to fight over it, but also small enough from my side of the table that I don't really care if this gets countered. Yeah, Fluster is fine. Fluster doesn't get fought over by these cards very well. And as stupid as this sounds, it's super important that I end up with a 2/2 body in play at the end of this, because it makes Teferi much less threatening. Alright. We're doing Jace plays here. Back to basics. I will Force of Will that. Pitch the Subtlety here. That's a great draw. That makes casting a Shardless Agent this turn viable. Go ahead and crash in with this. I have 2 Volcanic Islands, so I still have a target. Alright, my opponent's at 15. Blue, green, 1, extra 1. Mountain Cycle for Volk. Grab it. Play it. Shardless Agent. Cast Living End. Another Fluster. Force of Wills aren't doing jack shit. Honestly, though, my position's not that bad. Like, this is gonna sound dumb, but if my opponent doesn't make a big play this turn, like, I just have 4 power in play backed by Force of Will. And that's totally reasonable on this board. Especially with, like, 1 more land drop representing the Troll and Friends being hard castable now. Yeah, okay, yeah. Every turn cycle that's like this is just 4 more damage for me. That was a bad draw. I will hold up Force of Will. rather than suspend that this turn. My Shardless agents and violent outbursts are now bad. My opponent is flooding out here. Good news for Phil fans. That is a little more interesting. Still think I just hold up hardcast Force of Will. Yeah, that's fine. Take 2. I'm just gonna continue to hit my opponent. Like, I just have no reason to drop Force of Will and lose the game to some Planeswalker or Monastery Mentor or whatever. Yeah. Once I draw another blue card so that I can pitch cast a Force of Will, I can play another body. Yes, that's fine. Yep. All right, my opponent goes to 2, which is lethal with Shardless Agent in play. Mystic Sanctuary puts Swords to Plowshares on top. They will Brainstorm, that's fine. Yep, Brainstorms are fine. Ponders are fine. Alright. So I'll go ahead and attack. Swords to Plowshares is going to get Force of Willed. Actually, maybe I don't. Maybe I just let them stay alive and then cast a Troll and have Force of Will backing that up. Actually, what counterspell beats this right now? Minor Misstep does. That's about it. Alright. Predict targeting themselves, sure. Alright, is it Force of Will and blue card? It is not. GG's. Alright, I'm a little unsure about this hand. So I'm on the draw with a single Cycler. I have 2 abilities to go for it. I have drawn 1 Living End already. I'm going to say Reluctant Keep on this one. The fuck is that? Oh, it's Cavern of Souls. Sure. So some sort of initiative deck, probably. Probably something that Living End will be good against. I think I lead on Badlands, despite the fact that that can be slightly awkward sometimes. Alright, I assume I'm going to see some sort of Seasoned Dungeoneer, Caves of Chaos Adventurer nonsense here. Yeah. I don't care about the stompy side of my opponent's deck, I care about the Hate Bear side of their deck. And so, whether they're base red or base white matters a lot here. So, let's cycle, grab the Underground Sea. I'd like to draw another Cycler for my turn. Negative. So we'll just make a land drop and pass. I'll cycle a Generous Ent to grab the other tropical island. And then I will almost always cast Shardless Agent into Living End. We're hoping to dodge a Hate Bear this turn. It's indestructible, right? Fuck me. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, if no mana was spent to cast it, counter that spell. That specifically ruins my deck. Oh, that's some shit. Alright. Oh, that's frustrating. I don't even think this card is good. Am I dead? Basically dead? I'm not going to cycle. I'm going to take 1 more draw and then concede. Because conceding would just mean that I'm dead to this amount of damage. And then maybe I'm a Grixis control deck or a Death Shadow deck. Really wanted to win game 1 here. And unfortunately, my opponent playing the Boromir probably means that they are base white. I don't have Solitudes to deal with. I still play Force of Will, because my opponent doesn't always have Cavern. I also have to deal with Chalice on 0, which means some number of these subtleties playable. 4 of these? Maybe when I'm on the play I don't do that, and I just board in like 4 answers to the Chalices. This has no starting mana, 1 redraw towards it. I don't think I like that. Whereas this is perfectly fine. I can put the Underground Sea back into my deck. I will just make a land drop and pass here. We do still have to respect Magus of the Moon and friends. Alright, there's Cavern again. Sure. That's Magus of the Moon. I cycle, found that. This gets me Forest, and then I can still Violent Outburst through Magus of the Moon. Yeah. An Underground Sea. I would like another cycler. Found one. Fantastic. So we'll do this and pass the turn. And then I will hopefully be threatening enough damage that my opponent is just dead. That's the wrong number, friend. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't look like Death's Shadow anymore. But we take these free wins. Alright, I go to 15. End of turn, I will go ahead and Mountain Cycle. Grab a Badlands. So I think I take 2 more points of damage to not give them access to extra mana and white mana on their turn. Going to 13 doesn't matter. So there's Violent Outburst. Yeah. Alright. Lesson learned, hopefully. So, in theory, my opponent now knows to put their Chalice on 0. Cavern of Souls matters. I might need Force of Will when I'm on the draw. It's a little harder to set up guaranteed green for Foundation Breaker when I'm on the draw. I'm going to play Forces. I never want to go down this Forest Cycler. The Griefs are a little worse on the draw. My opponent doesn't always have the perfect starting hand that can just do everything on turn 1, especially if they have to mulligan. I think I have an awkward hand here. I don't have an actual way to win the game. I have good interaction versus a Chalice on 0. I don't know that I'm excited about this one. There's also some timelines where my opponent does not realize that Chalice on 0 counters Living End. That's very real. And so maybe I shouldn't keep a hand that specifically stops something that my opponent may or may not have figured out. I'm going to ship this. I like this a lot. Get rid of Street Wraith, I think. This has the ability to hit my land drops, and has Force of Will if my opponent plays something that I just cannot beat. Just opened on Cavern 3 games in a row. That's a little annoying for me, especially given that draw. Alright. That can't be countered. This also says activated abilities. So I should Forest Cycle one of these 2 identical ones in response. And grab this. We'll see what my opponent names. They have named Living End. Alright. I'll pull some more lands out of the deck. I'm going to need to get to 5 mana to Living End. Take 3 off this attack. Everything's still okay. I would really like a chance to use this Force of Will on something meaningful. Yep. So we'll double cycle end of turn. Grab an Underground Sea. And then grab a Trop. I'm just dead before I can get to the appropriate amount of mana. Opponent has 25 damage over 2 attack steps, so not even playing Shardless Agent does it here. 8, 9, 10, times 2, 20, plus Trap, 25. Alright. Cast Shardless Agent. Can't do that. Alright, so my opponent forges that up. Caves of Chaos Adventurer doesn't reveal anything relevant. Yeah, I feel like I got unlucky to lose this game. My opponent started on Cavern 3 games in a row, had human into human, whereas I beat most things that aren't human into human with Force of Will. Oh, sorry, human into human into human. I get trapped down to 2 now as well. Yeah, and that will do it. I will concede here. That's pretty unfortunate. We end up with a 2-3 finish. Alright, so where do I stand at the end of the league? I give this deck a thumbs up despite the 2-3 finish. I legitimately think that we were unlucky to finish at 2-3. There were so many moments in this league where the universe aligned to just say no to me. For example, the blind counterbalance flip hitting the land to lose me the game, my opponent randomly playing Boromir and then having it in that last round. And I feel like this is going to be on average a 3-2 deck or above. I will say I don't think this is the most powerful thing that you can be doing in Legacy, but I like what this deck is doing. So many of the graveyard hate cards that are played in this format, such as Surgical Extraction, are not actually going to do anything versus Living End. Like, oh, you surgical one of the 5 creatures that I have in the graveyard, Cool. Endurance is still a bit of a kick in the teeth, in particular since it can also come back afterwards. But generally speaking, with Grief and Force of Will to kind of push your way through and protect your combo, like this is good. And when things go wrong and you can't combo, like we cast a ton of 6-drops in this deck that has 14 lands. Your lands really do go a long way when you are playing these cycling creatures that can specifically go and get your dual lands. And they also help you to play around the moon effects as well. I will say I had great difficulty in sideboarding with this deck list. Playing my first league with this deck, it was very hard to tell like what pieces are the most expendable here. What can I cut in any given matchup? Which things can I ignore? Which things do I have to ignore? Which things can I power through? That's the sort of stuff that's going to come with experience piloting the specific deck. And I don't have that. So thumbs up from me. Folks, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you end up needing any paper Magic cards, remember check out Cool Stuff Inc. and use promo code ThrabenU to save 5% on your order. I hope you have a great rest of the day. See ya!